100% of what I've done from a career point of view is because someone else has suggested it to me.
But how did you decide, okay, I will leave, I'll come back from Chicago, I'll go to Citibank, I'll go to HSBC.
I had to meet Narayan Murthy to be an investor in our fund. And I had a half an hour slot with him. Within 5 minutes, he had agreed to invest in us. People worry too much about the downside. What's the worst that can happen? On average, we're going to live till 80 years old.
Correct.
So if you take a bad career decision and you lose 3 years of your life, so what? I started getting a whole lot of phone calls from startups in India. And so I realized two things. One is that there's clearly a shortage of skill sets in startups. And more importantly, the model was very simple. IT company plus CFO equals IPO.
Did you ever imagine what HDFC would become? That was very good. Hold on. Okay. We're rolling, right? Hey guys, shot an incredible episode with Luis Miranda, founding member of HDFC Bank, founder of Indian School of Public Policy, founding member of IDFC in his very early years. Just such a lovely human being. Doesn't take himself very seriously despite kind of building out iconic institutions. Clearly, I think the 2-3 things I took away was tremendous amount of IQ and EQ combined. I think some people are extremely high on IQ, sometimes struggle with EQ. Some people are extremely good with people, but struggle with, kind of making sense of complex situations or numbers. But with Luis, I think IQ plus EQ combination was stellar. Plus you layer that with like 35, 40 years of just a stellar career. So amazing visionary operator. Second thing I think was just extremely driven to understand social situations. So I spoke a little bit about men having role models early on in their lives, and he latched onto that, sent me a message. Through this conversation, I also realized how much he spends time on social issues. And third is, what a great storyteller. Like the way he uses language, the way he smiles, the way he emotes, the honesty in his eyes comes through. So this episode was just a lot of fun and a learning experience for me. And I really hope that you enjoy the conversation with Luis. He's just an amazing guy. Welcome to the BarberShop, and thank you for taking time on this and driving 2.5 hours all the way.
But my hair's grown in the last 2.5 hours.
Yeah, I can imagine. But I would like to kind of start off with talking about, you reached out to me on LinkedIn after reading a few posts. But what prompted that? I think, we come from different worlds. I've never, you're one of the few people who's come on the BarberShop who I have not overlapped with in some capacity as an investor or a co-founder or, as a client at McKinsey or something. I've observed you from a distance, but you reached out and I wanted to kind of understand why.
I just like meeting people. I'm just a curious guy. And I was just talking to a couple of friends. I'm going this evening to meet Shantanu at the Bombay Shaving Company. And how did you get to meet up? And I said, I got this LinkedIn message. And that's what I keep telling people, reach out. You have no idea what could have happened. I sent you a message, you could have ignored it. That's fine.
Yeah.
Life goes on. But I sent you a message and then I got a chance to spend 2.5 hours in a cab. But it's that. I'll give you another example of how just reaching out to people can make a difference. During COVID, I saw an article again on LinkedIn, a post, where this was a movie, which is an article which came after the movie Sanya came out, on the badminton player. And this was a lady who wrote about how she was a badminton player. She represented India, and she was also featured in that movie in a small way. There was
she's the
one who beated her.
Yeah.
And defeated her when she was a kid, and and the mother slapped Sanya, and so she wrote about it, and she also wrote about how she realized later on that she's not going to be a world champion, but Sanya is going to be a world champion, and she went on, and this lady went on to do something else. Her name was Aditi Mutatkar. I just liked what she wrote, so I wrote back saying, "Hey, I liked what you did," and she wrote back, and now we catch up regularly. my wife and my wife did some assignment for her. She works for an organization called Simply Sport about working on women and adolescent women and women issues in sport. And my wife sort of was doing some work with them, and we have met her family, and I'm meeting her this Sunday when she happens to be in town. So it's just those random things, and people don't realize that actually reaching out can have such interesting opportunities.
Correct.
So that's why I reached out to you, and we quite often in our heads we wonder, would I look stupid if I reached out? Would it now? Okay, people say, okay, Luis, you're a big guy, and therefore you're reaching out. Someone will reply back. No, a lot of people don't reply back to me. That's one. But I'll give you another story if you don't mind me going on about this.
Please do. This is all about your stories.
So there's a little coffee shop next to my place called the Village Shop. It's a lovely sort of quiet place in Bombay, in Bandra. It's quiet. In fact, the owners came and told me, Luis, we want you to can you help us? How do we get more traction? And because you come regularly, you seem to like this place. And I said, I'm in this dilemma because I come here because it's quiet. And if it's packed and noisy, I will not come here. Yeah? So I don't want to advise you on how to make it more packed here. But so I was sitting over there talking to someone. And then there was this lady who was sitting on the other table. She comes over and says, if you don't mind, I was listening to what you're saying. And my name is Naomi, and I'm looking at doing something in the social space and communication, and and can we talk? And I said, sure. I got to head out for a meeting, but this is my number. Let's catch up a week later. And we caught up a week later. And now she possibly is going to do a couple of assignments for a couple of the organizations that I'm involved with in the social space. And again, this young lady who's in her 20s just walks up to this random guy and says, hi, I like to talk. And that's what's, the beauty of it all here, that people quite often in their minds are saying, no, I can't do this.
Yeah.
And I keep telling people, just reach out. What's the worst that can happen?
Yeah.
And this was articulated best in another story. One of my professors at Chicago Booth is a guy called Marvin Zonas. He passed away a few years ago. But many years ago, earlier, we had set up a scholarship. One of my friends, Bruce, and we set up a scholarship in his name to basically to enable people abroad to come and study at Chicago Booth. And that particular year, there was a lady from Pune, Meera, who was working for TFI. She was going to Booth, and I told her when I met up with her before she left, when you land up in Chicago, reach out to Marvin and tell him you've arrived. She didn't. And about 3 weeks later, Marvin sends her an email saying, young lady, you must have settled in. Let's meet up for a lunch. And they met up and they spent 3 hours chatting away. And at the end of it, she told him, Marvin, Luis told me, Professor, Luis told me that I should reach out to you. And I didn't do it because I said, why would a senior professor want to meet a young junior student? And he told us something which was so important. He said, young lady, the world is complicated enough. Don't complicate it more by negotiating against yourself.
Wow.
And that's just the point. So I guess that was a long answer to why I reached out, because you wrote something interesting.
Yeah.
And why not comment on it? Simple.
No, but I to get a message from you on LinkedIn to kind of, which was so well articulated. It was, you're a big guy, and I found it to be very humble and brief both in the way you articulated. It felt welcoming. It felt authentic, and it's something that I try to do a lot as well. I genuinely believe that the more you reach out, for example, a senior of mine at McKinsey told me that whenever you're flying, see if the person on either side is an interesting person. And many people just kind of try to close and isolate themselves from their neighbors on flights because they don't want to engage in awkward chats. But he's like, what's the downside? The downside is you might have an awkward chat and you can put on your AirPods afterwards and ignore afterwards.
Exactly.
But what if there's the off chance that person is really interesting and you have a lifelong professional relationship or a lifelong friendship that can come out of it? And imagine doing that every single time where you put yourself out there. And it compounds beautifully, and I genuinely feel that at the end of the day, your body of work is a result of all the people who come along with you, and it's a big.
And I guess it's also reflective in the company that you built out over here. I mean, it's just looking at the vibe around this place.
I wish you could see it with full of people. But
I was going to say, I'll come again, but no, I don't do another 2.5 hour cab ride.
you need to come and station yourself on this side of the toll, not in Gurgaon. But do you think it's getting harder to do this? Like, for example, and there are a couple of Gen Z people in this room who don't like picking up phone calls. Or if their
Tell me about it. They'll text instead.
Yeah, they want to text instead. Or if the parent is saying, hey, just talk to this person. They're like, no, I don't want to talk. I'll text instead. And there is just it's not, I don't think it's a preference or it's aversion to humanity. I just think it's just general anxiety to interaction that may have been exacerbated by COVID in some shape or form, at least in a short-term way. But do you think that this approach is kind of on the wane and getting rarer and rarer?
I think people are scared to reach out, but I think it's sometimes just, it's easy. Okay, let's go back into time. Okay. I like gifting books to people. So one year our son decided to gift me a book called The Book. And it was a book about the history of book. And the author, she starts off by saying, today's people say that people don't read, but actually they read, they read differently. And goes on to talk about how, books were, what people wrote on was based on the technology that existed at that time. One time it was on caves, then it was on papyrus, then on paper, and now it's on a phone.
Correct.
So, so it's based on the technology, and people read on the phone. Now sometimes they read text, or sometimes they see it in visual form. And but in the story, she also talks about why people in the past have always been reluctant for technology. So Socrates never wrote. He never wrote. He only talked, because he believed that writing was bad technology. So he never wrote a book. Plato, his disciple, wrote books, but Socrates never wrote. And he felt that if people didn't communicate like what we're doing now, there wouldn't be that social connect. Now what's happened is that, I have no idea when he lived, but it's many, many thousand years, a couple of thousand years at least ago. Now, people have stayed connected more than in the past.
Correct.
They have connected, but the way they connect is different. So earlier, if I had to reach you in the Socratic world, I'd have to go personally meet you and say hello, etc. And we would then also, he felt also that people's memories would not, remember things if they were not written down or whatever. So today, people can communicate across the world and do so in an effective way. Now, it's just become easier to text and therefore not sort of talk or whatever. I look back at when my wife and I were dating. We dated long distance for 3 years.
Oh, really? And was it like in the time zones, or was it like just
different? Was she was in America, I was here. And this was in 89 to 92 when phone calls were like some $60 a minute. And when you're earning 4,000 rupees a month, that's a lot of money. You couldn't, there was no email, no thing. So we would write every Monday a postal letter to each other. And we have a box of these letters at home by routine. That's what kept us back. So we wrote. And the fact is that that's what kept our relationship alive, by writing. So it's like texting today. So I don't see that necessarily as bad.
Yeah.
I mean, when we got married, we used to joke that now it's the longest that we've been together after like 2 weeks, and like, how will we handle each other here, because we've not been together. But for 3 years, we wrote letters to each other. She found my letters very boring, by the way.
But in long distance, sometimes you kind of you fall in love with it. You make the person into an idea in your head and the actual person itself, which is why when you guys get together, you will be very careful.
Oh yeah. And I mean, it was a risk. We bought.
How old were you guys? How old were you guys?
When we started dating, I was 28, 28, and we got married when I was 31. That's it. Yeah. So come back to, so people are writing now. So I don't see anything wrong in that. But at the same time, we shouldn't have a phobia about talking. Yeah. So I keep telling this to young people. So we started a mentoring program, my wife and I and a few other people in Mumbai, called Take Charge. It was actually to mentor Catholic youth in Mumbai. And I would tell these young mentees that I would work with over a year that talk to a random person on the train once a week. So the first time I remember this young lady, she when I met her the next time, she said, yeah, I met so-and-so, I was on the train and I met this stranger. And I said, what do you do? I said, my name is so-and-so. And what did that person say? That my name is so-and-so. And then what happened? Nothing else. I said, that's not a conversation. You got to talk. And she said, talk about what? I talk about anything. Talk about the weather, talk about the late train, talk about politics, talk about cricket. And the reason why I said talk to a stranger, because if you make a fool of yourself, who cares? You're not going to see that person again anyway. And you know, everyone who's tried it, within a month, they have no phobia about talking to a stranger. It's just getting it out of your head, just talking. So when you're told, okay, take the phone and talk, that's great, because you got to get it out of your head. Why do you want to be stuck with that idea that, you know, I can't? But you're right. A lot of people would rather text, and I get irritated. Call, pick up the phone,
call, yeah,
and you have these long emails, long WhatsApp. Just talk here. Yeah. But I think that's.
Well, I completely agree. I'm the kind of person who will pick up the phone and just call. I hate calendaring.
Oh, I know. No, that's where we disagree. That's
You're a way busier man than
I'm a Google Calendar. So much so that for our 25th wedding anniversary, our daughter said that, you know, your anniversary cake should be in the form of a Google Calendar page.
Oh, really?
Yes. So that it was with what I did 25 years ago on my wedding. How I would have planned my day if I had Google Calendar in 1993.
But for me, like, I think just whenever I see a full calendar, it throws me off because I feel like I have no time to myself.
That is true.
I feel like my most valuable contribution to my life and my work is if I get time to think, and I get the freedom to talk to people who are important to me and who I am important to whenever I want to. And a full calendar completely doesn't allow me to do that. So whenever it's full, I feel super stressed.
So my assistant Loretta gave me a good suggestion. She just made me block out time on the calendar to do nothing. So I block out time to read, to do nothing.
Yeah.
So it looks very official over there, my meeting, important meeting over there, or to read.
Yeah.
And I block out time like that.
So Deepthi, for example, she's like, I don't know if she's here, but Deepthi's like, dude, I can't be an assistant to someone whose 80% of your life is not on your calendar, and 80% of your calendar you don't do at all. I'm like, no, but that's the whole, that the magic is in marrying these two things, and she's been pretty awesome at that. But I think people operate differently, and I think, but I want to come back to what you spoke about, which is grabbing opportunities that may not seem like opportunities, and oftentimes grabbing them without an agenda of self-interest, right? You reaching out to me had nothing to do with you gaining anything materially, right? There's nothing which I could in any way materially kind of provide you, except for just maybe curious, satisfy your curiosity of something which I'm talking about. And has that helped you in, because your career is just phenomenally distinctive in the sense that you founded a educational institute for public policy. You do so much work in the philanthropic space. You just spoke about starting something with your wife called Taking Charge. We spoke about Soro. We spoke about, and you've obviously taken on significant roles in building iconic institutions during your career as well. As you did this aspect of your personality, which is grab opportunities to talk to good people or to talk to interesting people whenever you get a time, did that help in building relationships and make your career what it was, or was it just a way to kind of become a lot more curious along the way?
Everything that I've done, and I mean everything, 100% of what I've done from a career point of view, is because someone else has suggested it to me.
Give me examples. So this is interesting, because everyone watching this right now is building a career in some shape or form.
I have, so when I quit also in 2010, people asked me, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm waiting for someone to tell me. Because literally, I realized that whatever I've done, whatever I thought I would do has failed. I mean, this is 100%. Coming back to India with Citibank.
So for the person watching, just kind of break your career down into college, and then what did you do?
Okay. College. Why did I do my BCom? My dad said do it. Okay. Why did I do my CA? My dad said do it.
So you're a BCom and CA from Bombay?
CA Bombay. And then why did I do my MBA? My dad said to do it. Okay. So my mom and dad said, go do it. So that's why I did it. I was a good son. did it.
Also good strategy, by the way.
It worked. So today when I see people telling me, my folks want me to do this, why did you do it? And I said, my dad told me to do it. Now, and it's interesting. So years ago, and our son was much younger. He'd gone on a holiday to spend time with his grandparents, and my dad called me and said, I was talking to Kashif, and you've not planned his life. So I said, yeah, but I did yours. And I said, that's true. You told me what all to study. I mean, what I did after that was nothing which was not as per the plan. It was out of syllabus. But he said, and I'm grateful for you getting me to do this. But I think that this guy can figure it out on his own and make his own mistakes. So that's what I did. And
where did you MBA from? In India, outside?
No, I did my college was in Bombay. I did my BCom at HR College. Then I worked for Price Waterhouse as a chartered accountant. Then I spent a year in Dubai with KPMG because I was actually supposed to go to Chicago in '86 to the University of Chicago Booth School. And I was sick of studying, so I took a year off. And then I went to Dubai for a year, and then I went to Chicago. And I came, so then I worked for the summer of '88 at Citibank in the chairman's office. And I was working on a strategic plan for the bank and all that.
In New York.
Brilliant plan in New York. It was a great chance to sort of, hang out with the top parts of the bank. We wrote a brilliant plan. The plan was implemented, and the bank lost a lot of money over the next 3 years. and I guess, and I'm lucky I didn't stay on, because if I joined the team, I possibly would have got fired also. But anyway, and Citibank at that time was the world's largest bank. So I get a letter one day, because this is way back in 1988. So there was no email. So I would get a letter by courier saying, we'd like to interview you for the Asia Pacific office. And I wasn't keen on going back to India immediately. And the only reason I went for that interview was because it was a free trip to New York. I got drunk the previous night because I'm not interested in the interview. And I went out with a friend of mine, and we've still been friends all these years. And the next morning, the first guy interviewing me was this guy from HR at Citibank Hong Kong, who irritated me. The second person was this guy from Citibank Singapore. And by that time, my hangover is kicking in, and I'm now regretting, why did I come here? And the third guy was Jaidev Iyer from Citibank Mumbai.
Okay.
My resume is all accounting, and more accounting and audit. So 5 minutes into the interview, he looks at me and says, Luis, what do you think about marketing foreign exchange products in India? So I look at him and I tell him, I have no idea what you are talking about. I spent the next 11 years doing that.
Jaidev Iyer told you. He answered his own question in the interview?
So he spent the next half hour, which I think is a good interview technique, telling me what the job is about as opposed to questioning me. And then he told me, I want to let's go out for lunch, and then we met up for lunch, etc. But the point is that today people agonize about preparing for interviews, and I keep telling people you got to prepare. This was again pre-internet, pre-LinkedIn. I knew nothing about the guy other than the fact that he's a very smart guy. Because I talked to some people about him, etc. But talk about going in for an interview and getting asked about a job which you never heard about here.
Correct.
And to his credit, he had spent time talking to some of the people who I interned with, and some of the people that I knew at Chicago, and he'd done his homework.
So he knew he wanted you, he just needed to get you excited.
That's right. And he promised me the job which paid peanuts. But to me, that was an exciting opportunity. And that's why I came back. So today when I see people wanting to come back and saying, I want to have this salary and all that, I said, I had none of that. I was the lowest paid guy in my graduating class. And I thought I was a failure in a way because, I didn't have this fancy job, etc. Anyway, so that's one thing. So that's how I got into banking. And so the first decade was in banking. The second decade was in private equity, and then since then I've been in the non-profit world to a large extent.
So banking, private equity, accounting,
and accounting first, yes, that's right. So that's been the sequence. And so people also ask, why? It's how do you move from one to the other? People asked me. I didn't sort of come up and say, listen, I'd like to do this. And I think it's to the credit of those people for identifying that I can do it. Because quite often we don't understand. I'll talk to you about some of those stories about it. And therefore, I think, people who look for prior relevant work experience, I think is nonsense. It's highly overrated. I look for instead for attitude. Attitude and basic skill sets is what is needed here. Hunger, right work ethic, etc. That's what's needed. Anyway, so one day I was not happy with some of the stuff happening at Citibank, and
What year was this?
this was in '92.
Okay.
And I was talking to one of my colleagues in the morning. Now that evening, she's having dinner with the treasurer of HSBC, and he tells her, Nisha, I'm looking for someone to run treasury sales India. And she says, talk to Luis. And Arvind says, no, Luis will never leave Citibank. He's a die-hard Citibanker, which I was. She said, just talk to him. Now, if I hadn't had that conversation that morning, she would never have thought of mentioning my name.
Correct.
And like within a few days, I'm now at HSBC, running sales. And then I realized that I've had enough of multinationals where guys sitting halfway across the world are making decisions without knowing what the hell is happening. And I was looking for, so after a couple of years, I decided that I've had enough of that. And I want to work in, actually the trigger for that was a conversation I was having with this English guy, head of risk.
At HSBC.
At HSBC, Mike. And I told him, Mike, I only see you sitting in the office. I don't see you getting out. You're looking after risk. He said, no, in India, if you go out and meet people, then they'll ask you for favors. Then you might as well be sitting in Hong Kong or London for all you care then, yeah? So that's what I realized, this was like, didn't make sense to me. But in those days, in the mid-90s, those companies who paid a decent wage were not professional, and those who were professional didn't pay a decent wage.
Correct.
And then out of the blue, I get a phone call. Luis, we're starting a bank. Are you interested? Now, in my entire thinking, I never thought I would be in a startup. In fact, when we started HDFC Bank, we never used the word startup here because those words didn't exist at that time here.
Who were these people? How did it look? What did the office look like? It's one of India's most iconic institutions.
We never had fancy offices like this.
This is not fancy.
Both, you can imagine what we had, okay? So,
how many of you were there? What did you?
So I was employee number 3
at HDFC.
At HDFC Bank here, banker number 3.
Wow.
And
who 1 and 2?
There was a guy called Harish, engineer, and then there was C.N. Ram. So I was the third banker on board. And yeah, and then we have the chairman and the CFO who were not bankers. But yeah, Harish, engineer, was running the treasury, running the corporate bank, and Ram was running the technology. So I came on board, and so we moved into a new apartment, and my wife had gone for a friend's wedding in Spain, so I was alone.
Where was the office?
At Churchgate. We had a small office on the 6th floor of Raymond House. And I would be the first guy in. It's because the house was getting done up. There was no kitchen, nothing. So I would buy 2 vada paos on the road outside. I would then pick up the newspapers on the door outside, on the floor outside the door. And I would open the door of the office because I had the keys. And there was no bank. There was no license. There was nothing. So I learned PowerPoint.
But how did you decide, okay, I will leave, I'll come back from Chicago, I'll go to Citibank, I'll go to HSBC, you're clearly like doing well. And then how did you decide, okay, did someone tell you, like, did you really look up to the chairman or the founder?
I just, to be honest, I said I was looking to join an Indian organization. And here was Aditya Puri, Bharat Shah, etc., all guys who I knew. And I said, what's the downside? Quite often in life.
But these were at that time, these are people you looked up to.
If he's going to do it over there, I mean, why would I think that? Why would I want to second guess it? And the
just
fact
followed the right guy.
Follow the right guy. And what's the worst that can happen? People worry too much about the downside. What's the worst that can happen? On average, we're going to live till 80 years old.
Correct.
So if you take a bad career decision and you lose 3 years of your life, so what?
That's it, yeah.
I just been lucky that whatever I've done has worked out well. And okay, there have been a couple of things which haven't worked out well, but that's not really sucked up my time. But all the big moves I made have all worked out well here. And that's why, we don't worry about the downside because we, in fact, look instead at the potential upside of what can happen here.
Did you think about it? Did you ever imagine what HDFC would become?
Never. If I did, I wouldn't have sold my stock so early.
When did you sell it?
No, let's not go down that road. No. Those are scars. I don't want to remember that. I still have some stock, but yeah. No, but none of us ever expected to be where it is today. And that's the beauty of it all here. That, today when I meet young people and they tell me, I'm studying the startup and it's going to be worth, going to have 1 billion users, going to have this, and it's going to, I tune off immediately. Because all I'm asking is like, how is it going to change the world? How is it going to make this a better world? That's all. In HDFC Bank, what did we do? I remember sitting down with Aditya about a year ago. We were just chatting about the early days of the bank, and he was saying that we never expected. We just wanted to show that we can give the foreign banks a run for their money. That's it. We never thought we were going to be the most valuable bank in the country. That we were going to be the third most valuable company in the country. We never thought that. But circumstances just enabled us to do it.
But was it like mission? Was there mission orientation of that nature even in the early days with like 5, 10, 15 people?
Oh yeah, it was clearly. I mean, Aditya ran a tight shop, and we did it. So I'll come back to the office. We come back to the office here. So, because I look at all this fancy office and say, wow.
This is not a this is a set that has been created. Because a fancy guy like you was
So that was the first office. I learned PowerPoint. So I remember the first presentation on HDFC Bank I did. I was the tech guy over there.
Was it blue and red?
I don't even remember. No, our logo, in fact, there were all the discussions also about the logo colors anyway. Yeah. So then we moved out to Sandow's house, which was our new office. And we literally moved there because the team was expanding and we needed a place to be. And Sandow's had 3 floors of the building and they'd moved out. So one floor, they've gutted all the furniture, taken it all out. And we had rented steel furniture. The LAN was a set of wires running on the floor. Someone kicked a wire, the whole LAN collapsed. Oh we didn't have enough chairs. You came in late, you didn't have a chair. It was as simple as that, yeah. That's the sort of, and that was really, if you look back, that was the great days. And then we suddenly had to move overnight because they needed to do up that office for the opening up of the bank. And we moved to Kamla Mills, which at that time was still an operating mill. I would take some of our partners out over there and show them this is a mill that's actually happened, textile is being made over here. And the first training session I did at HDFC Bank was under a tree because we didn't have a conference room. So under a tree over there, that's where we had it. And I remember when Tamal Bandyopadhyay was writing the book on the bank, and I told him about the story. One day he called me and says, Louis, I'm writing the book, and what tree was it? I said, I have no idea what tree it was. But yeah, but that's the first time. And recently one of my colleagues, she was a young lady at that time, and she just celebrated 30 years in the bank. And she wrote to me and told me, I remember that first training session you did under the tree. And that was it. That's how we started off. So today when I see startups with fancy offices and, and massages and fancy cafeterias, I say, we didn't have that. And it's that concept of being frugal, which was important. So one day I remember Aditya's announced, I don't remember what came into his head, everyone, we will not supply cups for coffee. Bring your own cup. And now the aim was not to be cheap, but just to get the idea across that we got to be conscious about cost. That's the culture we had here. And that's what built it out today.
At what point did you realize that this is going to blow up now? Like, did you smell growth early on? Like, were there green shoot signs early on?
So I remember in the beginning part of the bank.
This is 95, 96?
94 it came on board. We opened up for business in 95 and then we had our IPO.
And it was like a single branch. How does this happen? Was it like a single
branch?
There
was our first branch was at Raymond House and we opened the second. We had our second branch over there and then
what kind of corpus was needed at that time to like get a banking license and get it going and so on?
I think at that time we needed a large corpus of 100 crore or something. Something small. The sums of money, the number of zeros had just been added on exponentially over time. That was a lot of money at that time.
Oh, it's still a lot of money today as well.
But
and was lending kind of like what was the nature of? I was 8 years old, so I don't remember. Was the nature of lending also kind of mostly home and automotive?
There was corporate stuff. There was, but the whole retail boom actually started with a guy called Jerry Rao, who was one of my mentors at Citibank, and coming up with that. So it was there, but it was still nothing like what it is today. And it's really grown over here. And I think the whole banking sector has sort of played a large role in the development of this year. Yeah. So it's very, even the treasury operations that I was sort of, involved in, I feel like some sort of dinosaur now when I walk into a dealing room here. It's so much so much more high tech here. But we had fun days over there. And I remember our daughter was Our son was born, and so our daughter must have been about, oh no, sorry, we were living at that time over there. So our daughter was about a year old or so. And I would bring her to the office on Saturdays. And I'd put two chairs together because by the time I reached the office, she'd have fallen asleep. And then she'd sleep over there. Then she would get down. Then she would crawl all over the office. We had to child-proof the office because of her. And so this Tamal's book, there's one of the chapters is called "There's a Baby on the Trading Floor." It's about our daughter here.
Oh, really?
And I mean, we really had great time those days. Everybody knew each other. That's the challenge also with an organization. Today, there's got some, whatever, 30, 90,000, I don't know how many people they have. It's not the same over here.
Yeah.
So, but at that time, everybody knew everyone. And, but I mean, credit to the team for building up what is phenomenal. To me, it all struck me many years, about 10 years ago, it was a young company which we done some seed funding for, and had taken him to understand something on risk. And we walked into the risk office, and it was a huge football field of people analyzing risk. And I said, shucks, this is bigger than the whole bank when I was there.
Yeah.
And that's when you realize this is like a serious operation.
Yeah. Do you still walk into an HDFC branch just to kind of get
Actually, today you don't need to go there that often. Yeah.
Just for kicks, you see them.
Once in a while, I can go over there, and and then it's interesting to see some people who actually remember my daughter crawling on the dealing floor in the office also at that time. Yeah.
And how long were you there, Luis? How long?
So I was there for 6 years. And then, in 99, again, coming back to this, we rambled a lot about, how one changes, how opportunities come about. In 99, there was the whole dot-com bubble.
Correct.
And I was intrigued by it. And then I've been talking to Aditya also, I wanted to do something else. I've been doing 11 years of treasury work. I wanted to do something different. And I thought, joining a dot-com company would be an interesting place to be in. But I couldn't figure out, how I could value it. I'm a treasury guy. What can I do over there? And I remember I was pitching. I wanted to pitch for business to Infosys. So again, through the network, I asked one of our board members, who was also on the board of Infosys, a guy called Deepak Satwalekar. I said, Deepak, can you introduce me to Mohandas Pai? So he said, sure. So by that time now we have email now. so he introduced me and met up with. So I sent an email to Mohan, dear Mr. Pai, I'd like to meet you and talk about this. And he said, I'm busy, meet my assistant Bala. So I met up with Bala, with my team. We were chatting up and talking about why they should deal with HDFC Bank. And Mohan walks into the meeting and talks about some friend's company which needed some help, and we got talking about it. And he looks at me and says, Luis, you're wasting your time in banking. You should be in the IT world. And I said, you're crazy. He said, no, you should, and why don't, there's somebody who wants to talk to you. So I said, I'm always, as you know, willing to talk to people. So I said, sure, and within half an hour, I get a call from this tech entrepreneur that, Mohan said we should talk, and I'd like to meet you. I met up with them a couple of days later, and then suddenly I found that I started getting a whole lot of phone calls from startups
in India.
In India. And so I realized two things. One is that there's clearly a shortage of skill sets in startups. And more importantly, the model was very simple. IT company plus CFO equals IPO. So you got a company, you want to go public, you need a CFO, you call Mohan says call Luis. Simple. Model was very simple. And
that is so cool.
And then I started talking to a young company in Bangalore and decided that, the conversations went forward. And then one Friday evening, I went to Aditya and I said, Aditya, I'm joining this company.
As CFO?
Said, as CFO. He said, which company? I said, this one. He said, are you crazy? You can't leave us to join this small company. I refuse to talk to you. Let's talk on Monday. I said, okay. So I go back to my room and I call up a young fund that I just started up in India. They were my clients. Chris Capital.
Ashish.
Yeah. There's another partner, Ashish and Raj. So I call them up and say, listen, I'm joining this company. This is the type of company you guys invest in. So what do you think about this company? And they say, Luis, we just come out of a meeting with Mohan. We're expanding our team and he said we should talk to you. So I said, but I am joining this company. Can we meet for breakfast tomorrow? I said, sure. That's how I got into the venture world. It's as simple as that. So on Monday, I go to Aditya and I tell him, Aditya, he said, are you still going to the company? I said, I'm leaving. He said, going to the company? I said, no, I'm joining Chris Capital. He said, what happened? I said, it's a very strange world we live in. That's how I got into the venture world.
Wow. And just like overnight.
Literally, it was a weekend.
And you left HDFC after founding
And
it.
whatever, yeah. And then I was part of the founding team. And then I was there for 2 years and I realized what I really wanted to do was development stuff. And as you can see, a lot of all these changes have been because of the network.
Yeah.
And because someone else said, Louis,
Do this.
you could join us, come and join us.
I agree. Listening to smart people who have your best interests at heart actually is a fairly, I think it's a smart strategy.
Yeah.
You don't have to like apply your brain. How long were you at Chris?
I was there for 2 years.
Okay. How did you find investing in India? This is like
Well, I
99
knew nothing about investing at all. I mean, I've never invested before anywhere in my life. Yeah. So, yeah. So it was great. I mean, Ashish is an amazing guy. He is.
It's India's largest and most successful private equity fund along with Kedara maybe.
Possibly, yeah. No, it's done a fabulous thing. And Ashish really built up. I mean, he's an amazing guy. Yeah.
Why do you say that? Everyone says that about him, but whenever I meet him, like I always feel him that he's, like kind of strict and, kind of closed. And I always find it hard to get a read. I always feel like he thinks I want him to invest in, which I do, but the two or three times I've met him, I've kind of just wanted to like kind of get in, like I wanted to know about Ashoka and Plaksha and his education work and a bunch of things. But how was he in the early days of
He's
this?
extremely driven, extremely. I'll tell you two stories from my days, which are not related to the investing side.
That's great. Yeah.
I started wearing churidar kurtas to work because I just find them easier.
In
I normally wear this even. It's just that it's cold in Delhi. That's why I'm wearing a shirt and a pant and a jacket, etc.
This is in private equity offices.
Private equity. So for a month, I'd go for board meetings and all that stuff. So
Why?
after a month,
But why were you doing that?
it's just comfortable. It's a more comfortable thing to wear. I mean, and now you wear dhotis also. So it's just more comfortable.
Huh.
So after a month, all the partners, we get together for a meeting and they tell me, Louis, you got to stop wearing this. And that's when I realized how screwed up I can be in negotiations. So I told them, you guys are wearing jeans, you're wearing all these other shorts to the office. I think you should stop wearing that. And those guys turned around and said, okay. So I had to stop wearing. I negotiated really badly on that year. So that was 1 year. And then again, with Chris Capital also, we didn't have fancy offices those days. I remember we had one office, which was in Lower Parel, where in the evening there'd be rats running in the office, and we suddenly realized that we're bringing all investors over here from one. And that was what the mood was like. We looked like we were some startup over there and
Ragged,
running it, and that's the impression we had. And then finally we moved to a fancier office because Times Bank had their own office in Lower Parel in Kamla Mills, and I knew that it was lying vacant because we'd taken over Times Bank. So I went to the CFO of HDFC Bank and said, listen, that place is lying idle, you're going to use it, so why don't you just sublease it to us and we can do it. That's how we got a nicer office at that time. But, so that was one. The second was, again, we were a startup at Chris Capital also, so we never had a lot of money to blow up. So when Ashish and I were fundraising, we'd share hotel rooms. So I have slept with Ashish.
Wow.
And but it's really that's as I said, to me, I'm just used to that culture. Yeah.
You can only make out like today. You go to a Chris Capital office.
Yeah,
it's like
very
opulent
fancy, yeah.
private
Yeah,
equity
yeah.
fund, like successful, opulent.
So now even when I come to ISPP, I stay in a sort of a bed and breakfast place next to over there because it's cheap, it's convenient, it's an 8-minute walk to the school, it's an 8-minute walk to Deer Park. And I can just call up the owner on WhatsApp him and tell him I'm coming, can you get a room? And he gives me a room. Simple. So they just said, that sort of.
And what kind of deals? Like what was this 2000, 2001, 2002? Like what?
So, that was the time when the market was really going through a tough time here. And that's when we changed our strategy from being a venture fund to becoming a more private equity thing. And that is, again,
But started off with the venture, with the venture mindset.
fund, yeah. And that's to Ashish's credit. He realized the world was changing and quickly pivoted. But then that's when I also lost interest. I said, I came on board to work to invest in small companies that will go conquer the world. And we started doing investments which were financially great, but just didn't excite me. So I reached out, I sent an email to Deepak Parekh. Oh, but it's interesting you talk about Deepak. One of the favorite stories is that I joined HDFC Bank in '94. I'd come on board. He meets my wife for the first time at a cocktail party, and his opening line to her is, "Are you talking to your husband?" So she said, "Why?" He said, "Because when Deepak's telling her, when he left his foreign bank job to join HDFC, both his wife and his mother stopped talking to him because they were so irritated." So yeah. Anyway, so I sent a mail to Deepak saying, "Deepak, I'm thinking I've had enough of this tech stuff and I want to do something on the development side." And immediately the office called him and says, "Come and meet me tomorrow." So I went and met him the next day, and he said, "Do you want to go back to the bank?" And I said, "No, my banking days are over, but I want to do something on low-income housing. So why don't you give me a job in some back office of HDFC, and I want to leave at 3 o'clock, so that I can be home when the kids come home." So he looks at me and says, "I don't have that lifestyle. I don't see why you should. But we've got a mandate from the government to set up an infrastructure equity fund at IDFC. Why don't you set it up and run it?" That's how I got into infrastructure.
And you
I
decided,
never made an investment in my life, and I know nothing about infrastructure. And here was I setting up at that time India's largest fund.
and this was at the time when we were like the boom in infrastructure was going to start.
No, the infrastructure was dead. People told me you can't make money. First of all, you won't raise a fund, and secondly, you can't make money investing in infrastructure. Bharti was trading below its IPO price at that time.
But what gave you the belief that this
I'm
will
stupid.
work?
I'm crazy. To me, it was just the excitement. First of all, when someone tells you it can't be done, I have to do it. And my point again, what is the downside? I wanted to do something on the development side. Here was a chance to do it full time, and and give it a chance and see whether it'll work.
IDFC was floated by who?
HDFC and a few other. The government owned at that time 40% of IDFC.
Correct.
And then there were, I think 40% was held by foreign institutions and 20% by Indian private institutions.
That institution was also like taken off, and today it's like such a successful.
So we ended up, when I left, we were managing over I started the alternatives business for IDFC, and by the time I left, we were managing over $2.5 billion. So
how long was that?
In a space of 8 years. So it was phenomenal. It was literally phenomenal. And and that's what, so Nasser and then Rajiv, they gave you a free hand to do this stuff. And the first fund we were setting up, we were trying to raise what is that time the biggest fund, and today, I mean, it's ignored. It's 1,000 crore. I remember talking to Rakesh Mohan, who at that time, by the time I came aboard, he had moved to the Reserve Bank as deputy governor, and asked him, how did he come up with 1,000 crore? He said, it's a big number, so we thought, why not do it? I mean, today if it's not less than 100,000 crore, whatever, no one will be interested. But 1,000 crore at that time was a large sum of money.
But how did you pick up the skills? Like from whether it was treasury or starting a bank, to doing CFO work at a private equity fund which is small and raising money, to now going into infrastructure.
So that's an interesting point.
How did you find, how do you do that?
So let's go back to when I left banking, and when Mohandas Pai, I remember talking to my wife saying, here am I trying to figure out how I can add value to a .com, and then all these companies are calling me up. So what is it that I bring to the table? 1, I'm a chartered accountant. 2, I've got an MBA from a decent school. 3, I've been in a startup. 4, I'm a banker. And 5, I can bullshit, So, so quite often we underestimate what we bring to the table, and it requires someone from the outside to tell you this is what you can do. So even when I started IDFC, I mean, I said I never made an investment. So what is the first thing I did? The first thing I got is someone with private equity experience and someone with infrastructure. And because we didn't have a lot of history and baggage, we did deals which everyone thought were stupid deals, and those are the best deals we did.
Like what?
GMR. Our first investment was in GMR. When GMR was not known. So in fact, when we invested, people thought we were investing in some other company because no one knew about GMR. And we invested in the energy business. And then later on, the Delhi airport came about. We invested in the Delhi. There was a second investment in them. And it was a fabulous fund. We just were also there. The timing was right. We just hit the right time of the infrastructure boom. In all the way.
5, 6, 7. You're right.
And that's it. So it's a lot to do with timing. And then by 2010, I'd had enough, because that time also a lot of stupid deals were happening around over here. When you started IDFC, it was all about how can we improve the quality of infrastructure, and that was the driver. It was never about the money. In fact, when we started our fund, there was no carry. Remember Nasser telling me, Louis, I can't pay you what you're getting at Chris Capital. And I said, that's fine. Just be fair. And he was fair. He told me, this is what I get, this is what this one gets, and this is what you will get. And I said, that's fine. And I remember going to him with my tax return and saying, this is to show you that the tax I paid last year was more than my salary over here. But that's fine. Because I was just excited about having the opportunity to do something. We all bitch about infrastructure. You have the chance to do something about it. We were the first investor in GMR, we were the first investor in the Manipal Group, we were the first investor in Ashoka Bilcon, etc. So yeah, and and those are all large names today. I remember when Ranjan Pai brought in Temasek as a majority shareholder. One of the first people,
recently,
yeah, one of the first people he called with me. He said, "Louis, you were the first investor." Yeah.
Temasek took a majority position now, right?
Yeah. But we were the first investor in him. We put in $20 million or $25 million at that time.
Wow.
That was a big deal those days.
No, it's a big deal today. But like Manipal Group is just like
fabulous. Ranjan's fabulous. Ranjan's a fabulous entrepreneur.
But I now think back about the bankers from Citibank. You spoke about Jerry Rao, yourself, Ajay Relan, I think.
Yeah.
You guys,
Rahul Bhasin.
you guys built out like institutions are beyond Citibank also, and like from private equity to banking to infrastructure. Like very few people think about Citibank as like, I'm now realizing talking to you that institution actually was responsible for a large part of the banking, finance, and private equity venture capital boom that happened in India later on.
Yeah.
Is there something special about, or was it just again?
No, I
like
think
they invested in India.
So, which is an interesting point. When you look at also HDFC Bank, the team we begin. I think it's important that when you set up an organization and you want to do well, you got to get good people. You got to attract good people. And today it looks like a no-brainer setting up HDFC Bank. You'll be able to get people. No, at that time it was difficult getting people to join.
I can imagine.
But we got the good people, and that's what's important. I remember on the retail side we struggled initially just to get someone because none of us knew retail. But otherwise, that eventually also fell into place.
And how did the move into the development sector happen, or was that just a natural segue given stage of life
So I met. So now in 2010.
Right after the recession,
and, I guess. And I was a lot of stupid deals happening in infrastructure. I wasn't having fun. Our kids at that time were 13 and 15. So I said, if I'm not having fun, why don't I just stay at home and traumatize my kids before they go to college? And so that's when I left. And again, it's at all these stages. I left unvested ESOPs at HDFC Bank. I left unvested carry at IDFC.
Oh, United.
Yeah, and and that was fine. It didn't bother me because you will always have golden handcuffs. And today I see so many people who have made so much more money than I have, who don't want to leave because they're going to leave something on the table. And say, so what? You've got more than what you need. But they still feel, no, I can't give up on that. And companies will always keep putting up something. It's like a little dog. They're putting the bone in front of you all the time and you're staying on here.
Yeah.
Because of what you will get in the future. And that doesn't happen. So I quit in 2010. And I had no plans. People ask me, what are you going to do? As I told you, I'm waiting for someone to tell me. I literally had no plans. I knew what I would not do. I wouldn't start something on my own.
Why?
And I wouldn't do something full time because the aim was to spend time with the kids.
Okay. That was clear.
That was good. So for the next few years, the one who was actually most traumatized was my wife. So I would one day I remember going into the kitchen and looking at all the bottles saying, this is expired, that is expired. And she told me, just get out of the kitchen. Yeah.
And then how did the development world happen? Like who did you talk to?
Accident. One day I get a call, Louis, I'd like you to meet the founder of Sneha, which is an NGO in Mumbai, working on women and child health issues. So I go meet the founder, somebody I knew. My wife was a volunteer over there. Years ago, I was on the board of Akanksha again because my wife was a volunteer before that.
Yeah.
And then here she's a volunteer at Sneha, and so I went to meet the founder. I said, listen, I know nothing about health, so I don't know how I can value add. I want to do something on the education space. And Armida Fernandez, who runs it, who founded it, said, Luis, unless a kid gets proper nutrition when the mother is expecting the kid, and 3 years after that, whatever you do in education then is a waste of time and money, because the kid needs nutrition. Nutrition is so important at that early stage. And that's when I realized how things are so connected. That's how I got in. And every organization that I've been involved with, I did not know about in 2010. So Coro, another organization, I'm in my private equity days, one of our investors was CDC in the UK. And one of the board members was also now associated with another organization called Leaders Quest. So she reached out to, so I got an invitation that Leaders Quest is over here coming to Bombay. Why don't you come and join a session over there? So that's how I got involved with Leaders Quest. And they partner with this organization called Coro in Mumbai, which does some fabulous work with communities, grassroots leadership development. And I've been now connected with them for over 10 years. I chair the board. And I remember telling Sujata, here am I, you're in Chembur, and I hear about you because of an organization in London. So, so that's everything is just chance. Now, with Center for Civil Society, I'm having lunch with Ajay Shah, one of my friends. He used to be a consultant at the Ministry of Finance at that time, and we were meeting for lunch, and he said, Louis, what are your plans now since you've quit? And I said, really have nothing, and talking about different things that I'm interested in. He said, you should meet Parth Shah. So he connects me to Parth Shah. And before I know it, I'm chairing his board of advisors, and then I get sucked in more. It's been again over 10 years I've been involved. And then one day he said, Louis, when we talked to our alumni, what they really liked was the short-term programs we did for them, talking about policy, etc. Why don't we set up a one-year program, a postgraduate program for public policy? And that's how ISPP got set up. So again, if you look at all the things I've done, it was never my idea. It was somebody else's idea, but I think it made sense and I would run with it.
And that's the thing, I think you didn't lose the forest for the trees that way, right? Like you said, okay, fine. If there's something on the table, that's fine, but this seems more exciting, and I'm going to do it, and it's going to be a better worth for my while.
Yeah. And it was never, in all these cases, it was never about the money.
It was the challenge, it was the gratification.
So what is,
or the people?
Coming back to India, it was about, I'd rather do something in India than do something in the US. Starting HDFC Bank was, let's prove that we can build a world-class bank that we can all be proud of.
And you trusted the people who were doing it as
well. HDFC Bank, as an IDFC private equity was, let's build world-class infrastructure. ISPP, let's create next-gen leaders for a rising India. That's what drives you. It's that purpose over there, which is so important.
How do you keep measuring yourself on whether, because these are lofty goals, and lofty goals have very up and down paths, more up than down.
Oh yeah.
But you have to have like patient, long-term views on them, because otherwise it's very easy to just feel like you're going to fail, because lofty goals are not easy. But how do you measure yourself? How do you feel like you are actually on the right track?
So I have this sort of story which again people are sick of hearing. So there's it's Chicago booth. They've now got a fancy campus which is not there when I was a student, and there's a art installation which is a neon sign which says, "Why are you here and not somewhere else?" And I remember the first time I saw it, I just stood and said, "Wow, that's so profound." I must be the only idiot who sort of looked at it and said it's so profound. And then I use that as a start for anything that I do. Basically saying, why are you here? If I'm doing a session with you, why am I here? What's the purpose? And I tell people also, periodically sit back, because that's what I do. Sit back every 3 months, 6 months, and ask yourself, why are you here and not somewhere else? Because shit happens. Things don't go as per plan. And you sometimes get very frustrated, and why am I doing this? And that also helps you then look back as to when you came on board, this is why you wanted to do it. And maybe when you're introspection, you suddenly realize those reasons are still valid. And therefore I will continue. Or you may come and realize that why I came on board doesn't make sense anymore, and maybe it's time for me to move.
And that's also
That's
completely
also fine.
okay.
So to me, there's an interesting story on this. So here's again with Leaders Quest, they asked me to do a session for a bunch of senior executives of Google who had come down to India on a quest. And I was doing a session with them, sitting around in a circle on purpose. And again, I was telling them why you're here and not somewhere else. And one of the guys, the senior guys, told me, I'm thinking of quitting Google. So I asked him, what do you do in Google? And he said, I run Google Maps, or a senior guy in Google Maps. I said, honestly, I'm surprised to hear that you feel you have no purpose. I land up in any part of the world. I switch on my mobile, I rent a car, and I'm a local because of your product. Uber has created jobs and made life easy for so many people.
On Google Maps.
Because of Google Maps. Food delivery company. So you've created so many jobs because of your product. And more interestingly, you also are working in Google. Your stock price has gone up. So not only have you had purpose, but you've also made money. What a brilliant combination. And I left it. That's stopped. So about 2 days later, I get a message from a forwarded email from the organizers with an email that he'd sent them, saying that he thought about what he said. I thought about what Luis said, and what I realized is that I love my job. I don't like my boss. So I realized that I will just take my boss out of the equation and ignore him and just carry on enjoying my work. And that's the purpose of asking yourself why you're here and not somewhere else. Sometimes it could be something extraneous, which is irritating you, and you just got to knock that off the equation. And quite often you realize we tend to always get stuck on why things are not going well without realizing how lucky we are.
Absolutely. With the fixation on the empty part of the glass is so much higher, especially for high performers, especially for people who've kind of done well in life, who've kind of always been top of the class, kind of been successful. For them, it's even more acute, and it's very hard for people to kind of pay attention to the bigger picture. I did the maths the other day on MyGate. MyGate now has become a very cool way to do analytics on how many people come home and how many people give approval to. MyGate is basically the app. I'm assuming if you live in a society in Bombay, MyGate, or you have no broker or whatever, right? I basically picked up my 1 month. On average, I have 19 people who come home every day. Either it's delivery, it's the driver, it's someone who's coming to blink it, something or the other. Blue Smart is getting entry inside. 19 people a day. And the thing is, your phone is tied to...
Just two of you all?
Yeah.
and one dog or two dogs?
One dog. Chiku. And she is such an anxious dog. She kind of the moment the doorbell rings, she's all over the place.
Okay.
But anyways, coming back to this, I actually wanted to ask you, you make it sound easy, like Vidit said, like you make it actually sound really easy to make the switches, and it seemed like perspective is something you're gifted with, but I'm sure it's not happened. And I think from the way you talk, I think a lot of it comes down to people who have mentored you, and kind of, you say you've kind of followed advice, but talk a little bit about the people who you go to for advice when you're stuck, and who have invested in your career and in you as a person over the last 30, 40 years.
Sure. Also remind me to come back to something called LBW Plus.
Let's talk about that first, yeah.
Okay, talk about it. So I was in May when I was on campus in Chicago booth. We gone there for our 35th reunion.
This May.
Yeah, this May. And I was talking to a bunch of current students about my story, etc., and about how luck has played this large role in my life, etc. And one of my classmates, a guy called Bruce and I and another guy, Wim, we shared an apartment when we were studying there. Bruce is from Canada, he now lives in London. Wim is from Holland, who now lives in Australia. And we've been friends over the last, now 37 years. Yeah? So he told me after this session, he said, Luis, you keep talking about luck, but there's a lot of other stuff that you also had, your box of tools, etc., which you pick up. It's not just luck. So actually, I thought about it, and then I sort of come up with this LBW Plus model as to what's been really, how it's got me to where I am. And it's based on this deep research on a statistical sample of one, which is me. And L stands for luck.
Okay.
B stands for the box of tools,
Skills.
which is what you studied, what you worked at, what you've picked up elsewhere, the social skills that what you come to the table with. W stands for working hard. I'm never the smartest guy in the room, so I have to just work extra hard. So to me, I work hard because that's the only way I've known how to be able to get things done. So so that's the LBW, and the plus is finding a supportive life partner. We quite often don't realize the importance of a life partner in your life here. So Fiona and I, complement each other, drive each other mad, but it's really that sort of partnership which has also helped me to get to where I am today. And so yes, that's the LBW. So there is a lot of luck involved, but that luck comes because of the box of tools and the working hard that has also happened. And to have a partner who will say, listen, go do that. It's fine. Go do the stupid thing.
Yeah.
Or, I'll be there and, I look after the kids, whatever, you go work over here or do this. That's what's important.
A lot of people who have had successful careers or who've been successful at life, whether it's careers or other things, maybe it's a pursuit of an art or a passion or whatever. They always say this, that the partner you choose, the person you live with, is probably the single most important decision you will make, because that unlocks a lot. And people don't realize, especially when they're younger, they find it hard to imagine the impact of that decision over a period of time. And it's reassuring to know that it's actually something that people work on and kind of do over a period of time. But talk about working hard. I think that's again has become a rather talked about aspect of life nowadays. I think people, a lot of stuff in the press around 70-hour work weeks and 18-hour days and all of that stuff, and it gets equated very quickly to burnouts and toxic work cultures. And I have my own hypothesis on this, but it was fairly straightforward when I was growing up, that you work hard, you do better. You work hard, that's the way you'll get extraordinary outcomes. It won't happen through ordinary inputs. Sachin Tendulkar worked so hard to get to where he was, and Messi, and all the examples from the world of sports and art and tabla and this and that, who I looked up to. But nowadays I think it has to be kind of disclaimered a lot. And I wonder what you think about.
What's your hypothesis? This is got tuck hitting it back to you.
No, I agree. Okay, no, I think that India has grown really fast, and corporate India has the pyramid of corporate India has kind of ballooned significantly, and today we have a fairly bloated middle management section of people, a lot of whom like the authority of the position they're in without the responsibility of the position. And my hypothesis is that across corporate India, we have a bloated middle management that kisses up and kicks down a lot.
Sure.
And that is why people entering the workforce, so people at the very top have gotten there because they've worked really hard, and they believe that that is a meritocratic, clean, almost certain predictable path to the top, because that's the path that they have traversed. But people entering today are slightly disillusioned by it because the path is kind of covered by a middle management that is actually fairly mediocre. And I think that's why they both see this path as very different. Like the guy at the top and the guy entering the workforce sees it very differently. And I think it's much harder today to join in as, let's say, a young IT executive at Infosys and go and become the CEO versus what it may have been 20 years back, or any at HDFC Bank or McKinsey, any of these institutions. It's become a lot harder to go up, and I think a lot of people in the middle kind of abuse that authority, and people just feel like that's not cool. And that's why you'll see a lot of people shifting jobs, you'll see a lot of people leaving bad bosses, and people at the top always feel that it's okay, that's how you earn your stripes. But I think the worlds are different for them, and that's my hypothesis.
No, it's interesting. It's an interesting perspective. I need to reflect on that to think. It's an interesting perspective on that. But let's explore. Yeah, today, take for example Infosys, which I think is a great organization, and I'm actually where I am today because of Mohandas Pai and
Yeah.
and his sort of placement services that he did way back in 2000. But then look at companies at that time, 20 years later, which were bloated bureaucracies.
Yeah.
Maybe some companies in the Tata Group, for example,
Yeah.
or maybe
ONGC maybe
HUL,
for-
or ONGC. Those anyway were stifling organizations of that time. And maybe an Infosys is what is a similar type of company today.
Today, yeah.
But then there are so many other Infosys, young Infosys today,
Yeah.
who are young, agile, etc., going like Bombay Shaving Company, and where you would have a chance to go to the top and grow without necessarily that middle management.
Correct.
So, as you know, and I actually look back at when we won the airport bid. We had a consortium with GMR, Fraport, Malaysia Airports, and us. And Sunil Bharti, Sunil Mittal, they were bidding for it and they lost. And he wrote an op-ed in the paper, which I thought was a fascinating one. And he said, we lost because we were not hungry. GMR won today because they're hungry. And there will come a time when they will lose because someone is more hungry.
Yeah.
So there will always be new type company, because as a company grows, it does lose some of that entrepreneurial scene. IDFC changed when I was over there over those 8 years. It had stopped being entrepreneurial like it was when we started. And that's fine, because that's part of the life. So I, for example, do not know what it's like to be in a large company as an employee, because I've stayed away from a lot of them, or I've left before they became larger.
Too large, yeah.
And I just, realized that, my sweet spot is in smaller, younger companies and building them grow. So when you look at it, there are always other companies. So if you want, and there are some people who do very well in large companies, and there's some people who do very well in small companies.
Correct.
And you got to find your sweet spot. I mean, as I said, I got into startups by accident. I wasn't saying I wanted to be an entrepreneur, I wanted to be in startups. It just happened, and then I suddenly realized, many years later that, since 94, I've been in startups. That's like 30 years.
Yeah.
And and I never saw that as entrepreneurial or being a startup person, but that's really what I've been doing since 94.
Yeah. Vidit, I want to get your view. You went from a Nomura in London. He joined Bombay Shaving Company in Gurgaon after being like a high-flying banker at Nomura in London, because he wants to go and start up on his own. But I know you, and you're 26. Yeah. So you probably have friends who.
Wow.
You probably have friends who kind of are at younger junior positions in large organizations. You were at Nomura. You joined a startup. Is the path through what might be a non-existent middle management access from bottom to top kind of the reason why you came here, and do you see that happen with younger people in general?
So I have seen that happen. For me personally, I think I had like an amazing support system. So the long hours, I think for us, it was like being in a really nice army where we're all like working very late hours, but we're all together. We have a mission, a sense of purpose. So it was all really nice. But I've seen what a bad manager can do to you. I think like in my first few months, like I would be in office at 4 a.m., like alone doing stuff which I know I don't need to do for 9 a.m. in the morning. I know the senior leader doesn't want it either, but it's the middle manager who wants to get it done so he can impress his boss probably. And I remember after my first few months, it was terrible. I go to my senior leader and I tell him, sorry, I can't do this anymore. It's not working out for me. And he comes back to me and says, oh, I didn't even know you were doing this. And that I think is the problem.
Yeah.
Right? Like mostly like the amount of extra work that you're made to do is not required. And I think over time you kind of understand what's needed and
Yeah, I
what's
agree.
not.
And that ties in also with what you say, that
Yeah.
this bureaucracy in the middle. And that's true. There are so many people I come across in so many organizations where I honestly don't know why they're there.
I completely agree with you. You remove the entire middle layer,
You save so much cost.
Nothing changes.
You'll be more efficient.
Yeah, the strategy happens at the top. The execution happens, with hungrier, more agile young folks, and that's all you need. And this whole path is sometimes just ridden with with people who are just there, who make politics a part of organizational
Yeah,
structures.
absolutely, because they have nothing else to do.
Yeah, and they have to show relevance.
And I see that in large organizations, they're there because they're the company person. They're trusted lieutenants. They won't.
Correct.
But they serve no purpose. They just slow down the organization. They add a cost layer which is not needed.
Yeah.
And and in order to justify their existence, they tend to sort of want to do stuff. But you know the
Misplaced authority also. A lot of it is. One of my friends called it very interestingly. He said these are all the king's courtiers. And the king is, let's say, Mr. Ambani or whoever, like this big guy who will not have the time to kind of know what's happening in like a large 15 lakh crore company, right? So he will have trusted hands who are all over the place.
Yep.
And whose entire job is to make sure that he's represented in every small meeting.
Yeah.
And they will do stuff like this.
So you asked earlier about mentors.
Yes.
So
Before LBW plus.
I remember a class in Marvin Zonas's time. He was in his class. Jerry Rao had just won the award for Distinguished Alumnus Award at Chicago booth, and we were both in Chicago at that time. And Marvin said, Luis, can you ask Jerry to come and speak in my class? So Jerry very kindly agreed to. And by that time he had become an entrepreneur, and he talked about why it's lonely being an entrepreneur at the top. And I was speaking, and Marvin said, Luis, do you want to speak after that? And I spoke, and I said, the first thing I said was, Jerry, you talked about it being lonely at the top. I'm not lonely because I've surrounded myself with people that I can go to. One of them being you. And so I've never felt lonely because there was always someone who you can. So who's this coterie of people that I can go to? It's some of my professors like Marvin, Harry Davis. It's senior people who I've had a chance to work with, like a Deepak Parekh or a Jerry Rao or an Aditya Puri. Or it's other people like Shekhar, who gave me possibly the best advice I've ever
Which
received.
Shekhar is this?
I'll come back to it. And then there were people like my mom and dad and Fiona, my wife. So these are the people that I have as my sounding board. So I've never felt lonely. So Shekhar is a guy who I got to meet when I was at Chris Capital. Again, I think it was Mohandas Pai who connected him to us. And he came on board, and Shekhar was one of the early guys at IIM Ahmedabad, worked in a couple of companies, worked in Africa for many years with this NRI guy, I forget his name. And he came in as an advisor to us. And in 2002, I was in his car and I was irritated about something happening at work. And he takes out, and I was it was in Koramangala, and he takes out a picture, a small frame of Lord Ganesh. And he says, Luis, keep this on your desk. I know you're not Hindu, but keep it on your desk. And whenever you're upset about something, remember what I'm going to tell you. And what he told me was, focus on the important things in life. And that, Shantanu, has been the best advice I've ever been given. Because there's so many things in life that come in, all the time pulling you in different directions, work, family, this, that, etc. And how do you prioritize? How do you do it? And I was 40 at that time. And to me, what was important, which I decided for myself, what was important were my 2 kids and my wife. And that's been the lens that I've had all along. It can be different for different people. It could be a career, it could be making $1 million, it could be, getting married, it could be whatever, and it could change over time. But if you have just 1 or 2 things which you realize as important, then everything else becomes irrelevant. So to give
It's
you
instant perspective.
Yes. So if anything happens, how's it going to affect them? It's not going to affect them, it's not important. I'll give you a simple, trivial example of it. We live on a one-way road in Bombay, in Bandra. So what happens on a one-way road in India? People drive the wrong way. So I would yell and scream at people about this, and I'll get irritated. And then one day it struck me, he said, Luis, you're getting irritated with, I'm talking to myself, you're getting irritated with people driving down this. You are not willing to stand and stop people. You're not willing to get someone, employ someone to go do it. You're not willing to go to the cop station and tell them this is what's happening, do something about it. So my actions are really telling me that this is not important for me. So why am I getting hassled? So I don't get hassled now. I may still yell at them, but that's because I like to yell. But I don't get bothered. So suddenly you realize that if it's not important for you, why are you getting hassled with it?
That's so true.
And that was, and Shekhar's I keep talking about Shekhar's sort of, focus on the important things in life story. And because it's been 22 years and I still have that on my desk.
Really?
Yeah.
No, I think I completely agree with you. I think perspective is so important, right? I think my mom is a yoga teacher.
Oh, okay.
And she always talks about breath.
Yes.
And it's just a great way to just kind of calm yourself and bring yourself. And there's just so much anxiety that's created in the world, in your life. Small things. Like you were on the road for 2.5 hours. You wanted to come here. You seem to be someone who likes to be on time, or in general, we like to be on time. And sometimes I just get late a lot because of what's happening on the roads nowadays. I'm an optimistic person, so I underestimate how much traffic there's going to be. I end up late a lot, and I feel like I always get very, very anxious. And my mom is like, just take a breath and realize, do your best, forget the rest. It doesn't matter. Beyond the point,
So
it
tell you
doesn't
what,
matter.
I was not worried about being late because there's nothing I can do about it.
Correct.
So why worry? So I could have control. I have control till I start my journey.
Correct.
Now I looked at it. I was booked a cab. I was going to leave around 5:15. Earliest I got a cab was at 5:30. So it's okay. 5:30, an hour and a half. It is showing 1 hour 10 minutes to get here. So I'll be at 6:40. No problem. Suddenly realized it's not happening. What can I do? So I went to sleep. I went to sleep and then woke up and then I messaged you guys and then I sent a message again and that's it. So because there's nothing I can do. If I can't control what I'm doing, what's happening, I don't get worried.
And in these moments of anxiety, whether it's going late or whether it's a meeting that's gone badly or, sales in a particular week or a month is down, I come back to my breath. I come back to, okay, do I have a healthy body and mind? Do I have people who love me, who I love, who around me? And do I think I'm doing a great job in general? Am I honest about my work? And if the answer to these questions is yes, then nothing else matters.
Yeah.
And that's such a valuable, mindful reflection. Just because right now there's just so much. Like right now we'll get off the pod and on our phones there will possibly be 30 messages, lots of pressure to respond to those messages, people who want to be in touch. And if we allow ourselves to keep getting anxious, it'll be problematic in general. So I agree with your friend entirely.
And it's even an investment would go bad. I wouldn't worry because what's the worst that can happen? We lose money. An investor will get pissed off. I'll get fired. So does it impact my wife and kids? If it doesn't impact them, what difference does it make? What goes off my father? Seriously. Investors don't want to hear that, but that's it. That's the reality. Why do I want to kill myself for something?
Yeah. Money is just an abstract concept beyond the point. It's abstract.
Absolutely.
And it's okay. You win some, you lose some. It's okay. I think bigger picture on these things is just so important, especially when you're younger, and you're kind of building things out. You give a lot of importance to what people perceive of you, and I think that creates a lot of stress. Like, do people perceive that I'm hardworking or I show up or I'm smart? And it doesn't work. Beyond a point, you just lose authenticity.
Yep.
How do you see young people? I know you work in the public policy space. You founded an institution.
We're rolling, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, you're still chatting.
There is no difference.
Oops, did I say something which I wasn't supposed to say? Yeah, so you're asking.
You work with young people nowadays, and you clearly have a very high EQ. Like, you understand people better than the average person. How do you kind of help younger people find their footing, anchoring? Where do you think they're finding it harder today compared to, let's say, when you were the same age?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, Shantanu. And I don't think I have all the answers because today I come across a lot of kids young people who are worried about the future. And I'm not a trained counselor. So even with our mentoring program, Take Charge, we've done training sessions for the mentors just to know first aid in consulting, in counseling. Just you can identify signs of what it is. And I think first of all, it's really just getting people to not take themselves too seriously. Quite often we are too serious about stuff, and the moment you sort of stop taking yourself seriously, you can relax a lot more. And I try to do that by just the way I behave, and then it's just being genuine and showing that you care for them, whether it's a 15-minute conversation or a 1.5-hour conversation. It's just that. I'm a hard taskmaster. So I remember when I left HDFC Bank, one of my colleagues, Chandar, who used to run treasury sales in North India, he told me, Louis, you are the toughest boss I ever had, but you are the fairest. And I think that's what it is. I mean, shareholders have given us money, donors have given us money. We have a responsibility to the communities we serve, to all our stakeholders. We've got to work hard. We're not here for as a picnic. We're getting paid for it here. So we have a job to do. But I'll be fair. If you need help, I'll make sure you get that help. If you are sort of struggling, I'll be there to help you. If you push back and say this can't be done, I will give you a hearing. I may not agree with you, but I will give you a hearing. If you have to work late, and I will sometimes sit back and work late with you. But work has to get done here. And I think this attitude of, oh, I got to take time out, I got to care for myself, I can't work hard. I struggle with that. I struggle with the fact that we have to be a lot softer now with people, and I don't think that's necessary.
Yeah.
You don't have to be jerks. The problem is that there have been a lot of jerks. There are a lot of toxic bosses.
Yeah.
As we talked about earlier, there are a lot of toxic people around over here, and those are bad. But that doesn't mean, therefore, that we have to get soft, etc. So, Mr. Murthy is getting a lot of flack for what he said, but I can empathize with him because that great institution, Infosys, was built up because people worked hard.
Yeah.
Sacrifices were made. They went traveling out. They had no infrastructure. They had no fancy lifestyles. The families took a compromise at the initial days, and that's how they built it. And today, someone walks in over here and says that I feel entitled. I think that sense of entitlement is wrong here.
Yeah.
I think it's misplaced. I've been told, okay, maybe wrong is the wrong word for it, but it doesn't sort of gel.
Yeah.
Sometimes I hear, why didn't you come for this meeting? Or at school, why haven't you come late? And someone will say, I couldn't wake up, I was feeling stressed and all that. I find it difficult sometimes to relate to that. And understand that sometimes there are genuine situations. But to me, when someone is just genuine, like this one lady, she had a meeting with her and she didn't show up. I told her what happened. She said, sorry, Louis, I just overslept. When she tells me that, how can you get angry with that person? Yeah?
The moment they apologize, like,
Sorry, I overslept. And I said, okay.
you're honest about it.
That's it. So, instead of talking about, oh, the train got delayed, or the bus got delayed, or the car got delayed, or the traffic, he said, I overslept.
Yeah. Pramod spoke about it, and he said, he's at Ashoka University, he sees young folks take a lot of stress about things that sometimes may not be in their control. And for example, he gave me an example. He said that in the Ashoka University convocation, like a bunch of students were wearing, Save Gaza, anti-Israel, this and that.
Why?
And I think they genuinely are just going through those reels, or they're reading stuff, or they're getting overexposed to issues. Their heart goes out, as a young student, or as a young person, you typically have a I will change the world attitude, which is why human beings are as have progressed, because young people thought that they could change the world. But I feel that some of it gets totally misplaced, and we don't know how to prioritize our outrage or our activism or our desires, because we are just bombarded with so much information, and we don't know how to we don't know how to
So
compartment.
give a simple example of the Mumbai Metro. Now, there was this big issue about the turning shed at RA Mill Colony, where some trees had to be cut down or were already cut down, and the shed was there. And people started protesting against it, including my kids. And, and a lot of friends of mine were protesting, and they got very upset with me because I didn't support them in that protest. My view is very simple here. That metro, when it comes up, is going to get a lot of cars and people off the road driving, and they're going to be over here. Mass transport is what is required. Poorer people who can't afford travel in a car are getting squished in a train. Now, when you have added capacity, it'll make travel commute more easy for them, and that's it. But who are the people protesting? A lot of them were my friends who would never take the metro anyway.
Yeah.
What goes off their father here? So they just were protesting because it was fashionable. Yeah. And what eventually happened was, elections happened. After the elections happened, they scrapped that, it died. And now that same turning shed is being used and it's already operational. And all that, so what is the only result of all of that? A, the project got delayed by X number of years. Costs went up ridiculously high. Who's paying for it? You and I. That no one thinks about. And there is always a trade-off. That's what public policy is about. It's a trade-off between situations and outcomes, and which is the best thing. And yes, in all these years, the amount of carbon monoxide, whatever they got, and pollution that came out from all the cars that were driving because the metro is not available, is, I think, worse than those trees, those few set of trees that were there. Am I saying that we should cut down trees? No. But some trees are necessary to be done. Yeah. It's like people talk about reclamation over here and they're living in reclaimed land in Bombay. I said, then you should not be living where you are. Yeah. But someone 100 years ago or 50 years ago reclaimed that land, which you are. So people live this very sort of fictitious life. And a friend of mine, Shruti Rajgopal, talks about how, in a fancy 5-star hotel, people will be yelling at the steward for giving them a plastic straw, and they're coming to the hotel in an SUV and spewing out sort of pollution over there. So there's just it's just very misplaced
lopsided, stuff. Yeah. Like people talk about the World Economic Forum and all the private jets that,
absolutely.
that come there to discuss climate.
Absolutely. Or even now you're talking about Save Gaza, but what about the people in your own backyard over there who are getting killed here? That you don't care about, but it's very fashionable to talk about Save Gaza.
Yeah.
I'm not saying again you shouldn't care about Gaza. It's really sad what's happening over there. Yeah. But there are so many other problems which are in our own country, which are in our backyard. The way we're treating people, the way we treat our domestic staff. How can we improve that?
100%.
Yeah. 100%. Anyway, we went off track.
No. This is very much on track. Like I sometimes wonder, right? Like how much we pay blue collar workforce at home is a big part, right? I speak a lot about issues for men, for example, right? And how, for example, suicide rates for men are 2.5 times that for women. Adult mortality for men is 25%, which means 1 in 4 men will die between 15 and 60. While the same number for women is 17%. So there is something like men are more susceptible to cardiovascular and diabetic, occurrences compared to women. So something is happening there, right? And I get a lot of flack for talking about men because a lot of people think that I am anti-women because I bring up these issues. And I'm like, no, not at all. I think being pro-men is probably the most feminist thing you can do, because if you have good men who work hard and support families and are equal parents to their children and create future children of value and adults of value, they will actually free up time for women to kind of go and become economically independent and go to school and college and all of that and be good fathers to young daughters and so on. So I think it's a feminist thing to do. But I get flack, and I sometimes I once had a discussion with a friend of mine, and I asked, you tell me one thing, when was the last time, it was 3 women and me and a friend, right? Well, you tell me, when was the last time that we gave maternity leave to our maids or paternity leave to our gardeners or drivers? We don't do that. We talk about feminism and we talk about, being fair and understanding our privilege. But when it comes to these kind of things, we don't do it. We rarely do it. What percentage of our income goes as salaries to our societies and RWAs actually mandates that, a caretaker gets this much. Otherwise, we feel like if it's a free market, then we will get fleeced, while we only give 5% of our income to our blue collar workforce. In China, that number is 20%. In the US, that number is 30%. And we're probably the last generation of people who will actually be able to afford a blue collar workforce like this. So we cannot be selectively, empathetic and progressive about these things. And I just always struggle to understand. I always struggle to understand that. I think everyone just thinks that they're a better person. They're more generous than they actually are. I think I'm also guilty of that. We all stand, but I think with younger people, I really hope that they're lesser like tainted by
Well,
this.
our kids call us out. Sometimes saying, you talk about this, but look at how you are dealing with so and so. They call us out over there, and it helps
That's a
us
good thing.
also become better people. But actually, it's this whole issue of young men, which actually got us connected
Yes.
because you posted something on LinkedIn, and I think that's so important, and that's how we got talking. And I remember, I don't know whether you spoke to Natasha or you connected.
We have call set up. I was in Bangalore and then I was in Bombay. I have call set up with them next
So
week.
Roni Nilikani, started supporting one of the organizations I'm involved with called Koro.
Correct.
On a program we're doing with young men, and she was telling me how they initially got. She got a lot of flack from feminists saying, you're a traitor. I mean, you got to be just looking after women. Why are you supporting men? Men are the bad guys. And the fact is that we are, and you're right. I mean, feminism is also about having men train better and to treat you better. So this is an interesting thing. I think that's again what we talked about when we first connected. I remember reading an article. I think it was in The Economist a few years ago, which talked about why suicide rates were going down across the world, except in two places: white males in Russia and in the US. And it is partly, I think, what I was talking about was that they don't feel that they're at the center of the universe anymore.
Yeah.
Women are taking over, they don't know how to handle it. And then you're right, because if a man feels his manhood is threatened, he can be more violent against women. So during COVID, when guys suddenly didn't have jobs, they were struggling, and that Koro, they started reaching out to women at home to check, how are they doing, etc. They suddenly realized they need to talk to guys also, because guys suddenly realized their only purpose, which was to bring in a paycheck, is not there. So they have no value at home.
Yeah.
And then they sort of, they lash out, or they sort of are depressed, and they drink, and there's a whole lot of things. So both parts are important, male
100%.
and female, and all the other sort of genders that come along with it.
And they're different. The thing
Yes.
is, I think in a world of equity, we've tried to make it the same. I think we confuse equal with same. And I think people are different.
Yeah.
And I think the individual is important, but on average, like the genders are different. And across characteristics, they're different. And I think sexism is bad, period. It goes both ways. I was talking to Shinjini today, and the conversation brought up an important point that yes, we have objectified women for a long time sexually, and that's horrible. We have treated them as objects of, sexual allure, from item songs in Bollywood to the way they're picturized in music videos to whatever, right? But at the same time, we have objectified men with violence. So women are objects of sex, men are objects of violence, and they're both horrible things. From action movies to dishum dishum to killing to murder to everything. That objectification exists in both places, both wrong, and I think important for, as younger people are kind of growing up, to realize that this is not cool at all, and equity has to be like, it's a purpose, and I think one of the things that makes India so unique as a place to kind of build a career, get educated, is that a lot of good stuff is affordable. Like I know that we talk about inflation, things are getting expensive, education, but if you look at just the government education infrastructure, or if you look at government healthcare infrastructure, or you look at opportunities for people to migrate from states to study or to get into a coaching institute or go to college, I think the ability in India still to kind of migrate across socio-economic strata is still very, very high. My father is an example of that, right? He kind of came from Indore, lost his father when he was 7 years old, and worked and got his family out of a situation just through pure grit and going to a good college and getting a good job. And I think that's the beautiful part of India, and I think that should be preserved. And while we celebrate our differences and become a lot more progressive, and hopefully, my personal view is, I think, while, you know, I'm a big believer that India, the Indian civilization in like 3,000-4,000 years back, where our scriptures come from, they had a lot of this stuff figured out. There are a lot of stuff about life. They had a Gurukul system where, kids would kind of go away, and there was a Guru Shishya Parampara where you would learn from a learned teacher, and you'd come back and you would become a productive adult, and the family structure was the way it was. It was in tune with the agriculture that was happening at that time. And I think that figured that out. And a lot of those things, I think, is important. I am trying to get in touch. My mom reads a lot of this, and I try to learn from her. I think if we are able to do that, I think a lot of this will get solved.
Yeah, sure. So it's interesting when you're talking about this. I was remembering when I had to meet Narayan Murthy years ago. This must have been in 2008, maybe early 2008. I'd gone to meet him to be an investor in our fund. Again, Mohan had made that introduction. And I had a half an hour slot with him. Within 5 minutes, he'd agreed to invest in us. So I was in this dilemma. Do I get up and walk? Because mission accomplished, I came for something. But I have 25 minutes more with him, and I don't know when I'll get a chance again. So do I take those full 25 minutes? But there's also a risk that in those 25 minutes, I could say something that pisses him off. And he decides not to invest in us. Okay. So that was the dilemma I was, and I decided to go with plan B. And we got talking about our kids. And I said, I don't care about what they do as long as they're happy. And this was, I'm talking about 2008. They were 11 and 12 years, 13 years old. And so he asked me, what's happiness? And we got talking about what is happiness. And he said something very interesting. He said, happiness is the delta between expectation and reality. So that was a cool thing to do. And then I was talking about this. And I, of course, didn't mess up that conversation because he did invest in us. And then I was talking to one of our other investors. He was with the Asian Development Bank, an American. And we caught up for dinner a few days later. And I was talking about this conversation. And he said, Luis, I don't agree with that, because you can artificially set your expectations low. And then how do you grow as a person by just having low expectations? It's not growth focused. And he talked about how the Greeks would strive to win the gold, and they would strive to win a war, etc. They would work very hard. And that is what happiness is. And then I thought to myself, that also makes sense. But when you are getting that, when you're seeking that external validation, you're basing your outcome on something which is outside your control. So you can run a race in 4 minutes. You trained for that. But there could be someone who will do it in 3 minutes, 59 seconds. You have no control on that.
Yeah.
So then you do the best you've ever done, but someone else gets, because either they ate a better breakfast or they trained harder or whatever. And then you've not got that success. Or you study well in an exam, and then there's someone else who gets 1 mark higher than you and gets the gold medal. So if you are basing success on validation from someone else, you are setting yourself up for disappointment.
Yeah.
So in my wisdom, I said, you got to come up. Happiness is really working to the best of your ability, but expecting nothing in return. So then I was talking about this to a friend, and he said, that's what the Bhagavad Gita is all about.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that. And and he said that's exactly what Karma Yogi is about. Work hard for yourself, not for the validation. So whenever we seek validation from someone else, we are setting ourselves up for disappointment. So whatever you do it just for yourself, not because you want someone to say you're going to get this award. I don't chase those things because it's pointless. You have no control over that. You can work, you have control over what you can do. You have no control about what the rest of the universe is doing.
That's what even Asim spoke exactly this.
Okay.
About effort without the worry of reward.
Yeah.
Or he even said worry of reward or worry of punishment. Do your best, and that's all that matters.
But do your best, because that's how we will progress as a country, etc. So, and that's so important.
Agree. Luis, this has been a fabulous. I think this is, I always feel like with people like you who've just got decades of wisdom, experiences, I feel like this could be like the first part of maybe a 3 or 4 part kind of conversation. And I would love to have you back on the barbershop, and with it, then I will kind of pester you fully to bring you back to Gurgaon with shorter cab rides. But before we let you go, we have viewers who are, kind of latching onto the barbershop for moments of insight, inspiration, that takes them over the fence to do something that they didn't have the courage to do before they watched this episode. Frankly, I get messages a lot that I watched this episode with this person and they said this, and that was the moment where I realized I want to. And those moments usually happen at the very end. So if there is someone who's watching, who's in their 20s, who's kind of hungry, but maybe is searching for that small bit of direction, any last words of advice to them beyond what we spoke, or all we spoke about today?
I'd say, don't take yourself too seriously. Don't take life too seriously. Enjoy yourself. Enjoy the journey. Work hard. I mean, as I said, I come back to that LBW plus. I don't know of any other way to succeed other than hard work. So it's as simple as that.
Yeah.
But just, do the best you can for yourself. Don't be bothered what other people think. There's a guy called Richard Feynman.
Yes, I love him. Surely you're joking, Mr. Feynman.
Yes, or why do you care what other people think?
Correct.
I was given that book again by Bruce, the B in the LBW, and he talks about Richard Feynman, who, by the way, Bill Gates said was Richard Feynman. Bill Gates said was the best professor he never had.
Yeah.
and Richard Feynman was a guy who, had this childhood sweetheart who developed tuberculosis. Her name was Arlene, and he decided, and she was put into a sanatorium. In those days, you really didn't have a chance once you got TB, and this must be in the 40s or the 50s, or 50 maybe in the US. But he persisted with her, and they got married. And after getting married at the town hall, he took her back to the sanatorium, and they had this relationship, I think, where she was in a sanatorium all their married life, and then she died eventually. And whenever he'd be hassled about something or what other people think, she would always tell him, why do you care what other people think? And we always are guided by that. And frankly, that's a silly thing. What will other people think? Yeah. Go by what you want to do. Be true. Be honest. Don't be deceitful. Don't be evil. Just do what's best for you, and don't take yourself seriously. I think that's really what it is. People let me loose. You're relaxed, etc. I've had 3 surgeries in the last 3 years. I've had a sextuple bypass, I've had hernia, and I've had cancer.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And every year in February 22, February 23, February 24.
Wow.
And I look at it and I'm fine, and I'm all okay. And people let me know, you don't get bothered by it. And I said, what's the point of getting bothered? I've just been lucky that A, I had early detection. B, I have a network of friends who can connect me to the best doctors who did a bloody good job with me. And 3, I can afford it. So I am just so lucky. So, so that's it. When I see other people who look so sad because they're worried about, there's nothing which can do. I mean, when for example, had my bypass, for the first month, I literally slowed down because I didn't have the energy to do it. And today I'm fitter than I've been in so many years.
Touch.
And the fact is that you can choose. You can either wallow in your misery, or you can, look at the positive and say, God, I'm alive today. What a lovely thing. So I was walking, 2 weeks back, I was walking on the beach in Juhu, which is a lovely beach. I'm taking part in a 55-kilometer beach walk in January for an organization called Umeed.
Lovely.
And so I'm walking on Juhu Beach, and someone was telling me, it's dirty. And I said, you can either, when I was walking on the beach, you can either decide to look at the dirt, which is really not there. It's a pretty clean beach, or you can look at the lovely sand.
Yeah.
You decide what way you want to take it. And I think that's what the lesson is. You decide for yourself, do you want to focus on the dirt or you want to focus on the lovely sand?
Beautiful.
That's a nice shirt.
This was gifted to me by a very close friend, Prachi. She happens to be an investor at Sequoia, and she loves bringing, buying stuff from consumer brands which are young. And I also run a consumer brand which is young. And she said, I was talking to the founder, and the story is amazing. It's an Indian brand. They've got the best fabrics, and she's one of these people who's very passionate about brands from India for India, but also premium and luxurious. And at Bombay Shaving Company, we try to do something similar as well. So I was like, cool. And she got me like 4 shirts for my birthday this year. And they were super comfortable. And, there was just something about the shirt. I always get compliments when I wear them. They fit beautifully. And I was like, wow, man, something like this is being made in India, from India. So we got in touch with the team. And I got to, it's called Andamant. And, it's such a beautifully woven brand story. And
I gotta check this out.
yeah.
It is nice.
Yeah, it's really cool. And they have amazing designs, it's comfortable. I also I feel restricted in shirts that they kind of don't hold my shoulders well. And I love that their shirts are kind of really, they fall on the shoulder much nicer than a regular shirt. And I just feel very comfortable. And I started wearing it on the show a lot. Okay, all these 4 shirts Prachi gave me.
Okay.
And then the brand managers there kind of got in touch. And they said, hey man, you see, you're doing well for us. And, we got into, so Andaman's been been kind enough to give me really cool shirts beyond the 4 I had with Prachi. And I wear them on the show. And they kind of, and I speak about them to guests like you, hopefully.
And the logo is an elephant, is it?
The logo is an elephant, yeah.
In the Andamans, there used to be an elephant which would swim in
yes,
the sea.
this is
Raja.
this is about that.
Okay, because our son took a gap year before going to college, and he spent 7 months on Havelock Island in the Andamans.
This is the guy.
Yes,
Yeah.
and he lived in a small hut for 7 months, and he dived every day.
Wow.
He had like the ultimate dream job, and that transformed him a lot. So we've been to a few times to the Andaman, and it's a fabulous place at Barefoot Resort. But since we're talking about this, and the importance of brands and supporting Indian brands, etc. There are, and I'm going to send this, and I'll send it to you. So there are 2 sort of organizations that make some interesting stuff. One's an organization called Ladakh Basket.
Okay.
And it's based in Ladakh. And they make some fabulous, local stuff from Ladakh, which is great. And then there's this other organization called Third Share, which is products like coffee, etc., from the tribal Adivasi community in Gudalur, in Nilgiris. And I just buy this stuff again because A, it's good, and secondly, you're supporting a section of society which is doing fabulous work, and I think we need to support some of these places.
Oh, that's amazing. I'm going to check these 2 out.
I'll send you some stuff. I need your postal address, and I'll get it done.
Done. I'll let Loretta know. But thank you so much. You've been such a sport. Awesome.